My family used to laugh at my grandma behind her back, calling her poor, old-fashioned, and a burden. But the day her lawyer opened that envelope and revealed her $12 million trust, the same people who mocked her couldn't even look up from the table. My name is Lily Anderson, and I'm 56 years old now. But this story began years ago, long before anyone in my family realized who my grandmother truly was. To me, she was never poor. She was strong, quiet, and dignified in a way that made you feel safe just sitting beside her. Her name was Margaret, but everyone in the family called her Grandma Maggie. She had been an army nurse in her younger years. She rarely talked about it, but sometimes, late at night, when it was just the two of us, she would share small pieces of her past. Stories about long nights in field hospitals, about holding strangers' hands as they fought to survive, about choosing strength even when fear was overwhelming. But those stories never made it to the rest of the family because they weren't interested. To them, Grandma Maggie was just an old woman living in a small, worn-out house on the edge of town. Her clothes were simple, her furniture was old, and she never spent money on anything unnecessary, which, in my family's eyes, meant one thing. She must be broke. I remember one Thanksgiving dinner very clearly. The entire family was gathered around the table. My uncle was talking loudly about his new car. My aunt was showing pictures of her latest vacation, and Grandma Maggie sat quietly at the end of the table, smiling gently, saying very little. At one point, my cousin leaned toward another relative and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "She probably still has the same coat from 20 years ago." They laughed, softly, but not quietly enough. I looked at Grandma. She had heard it. I could tell. But she didn't react. She simply took a small sip of her tea and kept smiling. That was the part that always stayed with me. She never defended herself, never corrected anyone, never tried to prove them wrong. She just stayed calm. After dinner, I followed her into the kitchen while she was washing dishes. "They shouldn't talk about you like that," I said. She smiled at me softly. "People say things when they don't understand. That doesn't make it okay." "No," she agreed gently, "but it also doesn't make it important." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She turned off the water and dried her hands slowly. "Lily," she said, looking at me, "never measure your worth by what others assume about you." I didn't fully understand her words at the time, but I remembered them. Years passed, and nothing really changed. The family continued their lives. Big houses, expensive habits, constant comparisons. And Grandma Maggie stayed exactly the same. Simple, quiet, invisible to most of them, but not to me. I visited her often. We drank tea together, talked about small things, sometimes about her past, sometimes about nothing at all. And every time I left her house, I felt grounded, like I had just been reminded of something real. Then one winter afternoon, everything changed. I got a phone call. It was from my aunt. Her voice sounded unusually serious. "Lily, it's your grandmother." My heart dropped. "What happened?" "She passed away this morning." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words didn't feel real. Grandma Maggie, gone? Just like that? The next few days were a blur. The funeral was small, quiet, just like she would have wanted. Family members came, dressed in black, offering polite condolences. Some looked genuinely sad. Others, not so much. I noticed something during the gathering after the funeral. The conversations weren't really about her. They were about logistics. Her house, her belongings. What would happen next? At one point, I overheard my uncle say, "Well, there probably isn't much to sort through." My aunt nodded. "Maybe the house is worth something." I stood there, listening, and for the first time, I felt something I had never felt toward my family before. Disappointment. Not anger, just disappointment. A few days later, we were all called to a meeting. Grandma's lawyer had requested that the entire family be present. To discuss the will, he said. We gathered in a large conference room. About 10 of us in total. Everyone was dressed formally, but the mood felt different. Less emotional, more curious. My cousin leaned toward me and whispered, "This should be quick." I didn't respond because something in me felt different. Like this wasn't going to be as simple as they expected. The lawyer entered the room a few minutes later, a calm, professional man with a folder in his hand. He greeted everyone politely, then sat down at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "As you know, we are here to review Margaret's final arrangements." He opened the folder slowly, and for a moment, the room went completely quiet. No one knew that in just a few minutes, everything they believed about my poor grandmother was about to be completely destroyed. The room was quiet as the lawyer adjusted his glasses and looked down at the folder. Everyone leaned forward slightly, not out of grief, but curiosity. Because in my family, curiosity usually meant one thing: money. "My name is Mr. Carter," the lawyer began calmly. "I've been Margaret's legal advisor for over 15 years. 15 years. That alone surprised me. No one in the family had ever mentioned that Grandma even had a lawyer. But before I could think about it further, my uncle interrupted. "Well, let's get to it," he said casually. "What exactly are we dealing with here?" A few people nodded in agreement, impatient, expecting something small, simple. Mr. Carter didn't react to the interruption. He simply turned a page in the folder. "We'll begin with the property," he said. "Margaret's primary residence will not be sold." That caught everyone off guard. My aunt frowned. "What do you mean, not sold?" Mr. Carter looked up. "It has already been transferred." "To who?" my cousin asked quickly. The lawyer's eyes moved across the room, and then stopped on me. "To Lily Anderson." For a moment, I thought I had heard him wrong. "Me?" I said quietly. "Yes," he replied. "The house is now legally yours." The room went silent. Then suddenly, "What?" my uncle said sharply. "That doesn't make any sense." My aunt leaned forward. "Why would she give the house to Lily?" I felt every pair of eyes turn toward me. Not warm, not supportive, just surprised and slightly annoyed. Mr. Carter continued calmly. Margaret left a letter explaining her decision. He picked up a folded piece of paper. She wrote, "To Lily, who visited me when no one else did. A home should belong to someone who understands its value." My throat tightened because I could hear her voice in those words. Clear, simple, honest. Across the table, my cousin shifted uncomfortably. "Well, it's just a small house anyway," he muttered. "But I noticed something." No one was smiling anymore, because this wasn't what they expected. Not even close. Mr. Carter continued. "Now, regarding financial assets," that got their attention again immediately. My uncle leaned forward. "Yes, let's talk about that." The lawyer nodded. Margaret maintained several accounts over the years, including investments, bonds, and long-term funds. My aunt blinked. "Investments?" "Yes." A brief silence. Then my cousin laughed softly. "Okay, but how much are we talking about? A few thousand?" Mr. Carter didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned another page. Then he spoke clearly. "The total value of Margaret's estate is approximately $12 million. The words didn't register at first. The room stayed completely still, like no one had heard him properly. Then, "I'm sorry, what?" my uncle said. 12. What? $12 million, Mr. Carter repeated. This time, the meaning landed. Hard. My aunt's mouth opened slightly. That's not possible." My cousin shook his head. "There has to be a mistake." But the lawyer remained calm. "There is no mistake." He slid a document across the table. "These are verified financial statements. No one touched the papers. They just stared at them, like they might disappear, like they couldn't possibly be real. I sat there quietly, not shocked, but not surprised either. Because suddenly, everything about Grandma made sense. Her simplicity, her calmness, her complete lack of concern about what others thought. She had never been poor. She had simply chosen not to live like the rest of them. Across the table, my uncle leaned back slowly. She never said anything. No, Mr. Carter agreed. She didn't. My aunt looked at me. Did you know about this? I shook my head. No. And that was the truth. I had never known the numbers, but I had known something else. Something they never understood. My cousin suddenly leaned forward again. So, how is the money divided? There it was. The question everyone had been waiting for. The real reason for their attention. Mr. Carter looked down at the folder again. Margaret established a trust. A trust? My aunt repeated. Yes, and according to her instructions. He paused for just a second, then looked up. The trust is controlled entirely by Lily Anderson. The room went completely silent again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was shock. Real shock. What does that mean? My uncle asked slowly. It means, Mr. Carter said calmly, that Lily decides how the funds are distributed. Every head turned toward me again. But this time, the expressions were different. No longer dismissive. No longer amused. Now there was something else. Something they had never shown me before. Respect, mixed with something even stronger. Fear. Because in a single moment, the invisible person at the table had become the most important one, and they had no idea what I was going to do next. For a moment, no one spoke. The air in the room felt heavier than before, not because of grief, but because everything had changed. Just minutes ago, I was invisible. Now, every single person in that room was watching me, waiting, calculating. My uncle was the first to break the silence. Well, he said slowly, forcing a smile, that's unexpected. No one responded, because we all knew what he really meant. This wasn't supposed to happen. My aunt leaned forward, her tone suddenly softer than I had ever heard it before. Lily, she said gently, your grandmother must have trusted you a lot. I looked at her calmly. Yes, she nodded quickly. That's a big responsibility. It was interesting how quickly her tone had changed. Just a few days ago, she was discussing Grandma's house like it was nothing. Now she was choosing her words very carefully. My cousin cleared his throat. So, what exactly does control the trust mean? Mr. Carter answered before I could. It means Lily has full authority over how and when the funds are distributed. To everyone? My uncle asked. Yes. Another silence. This one felt different, more tense, because now they weren't just surprised. They were thinking, planning, trying to understand how to position themselves. My aunt gave a small smile. Well, we're family, she said, looking directly at me. We can figure things out together. There it was. The shift. Subtle, but obvious. I didn't respond. I simply sat there, listening, observing. Because for the first time, I wasn't the one trying to be accepted. They were. My cousin leaned forward again. Yeah, I mean, Grandma would want us to support each other, right? I tilted my head slightly. Would she? He hesitated. Well, I mean, but he didn't finish the sentence. Because deep down, he knew the truth. Grandma had seen everything. The jokes, the whispers, the way they treated her like she didn't matter. Mr. Carter cleared his throat again. There is something else you should all know. The room turned toward him immediately. Margaret left specific conditions regarding the trust. That caught everyone's attention even more. What kind of conditions? My uncle asked quickly. The lawyer looked down at the document. According to her instructions, the funds are not to be distributed equally. A small ripple of tension moved through the room. My aunt frowned. Then, how are they distributed? Mr. Carter looked at me briefly. Then back at the document. The distribution is entirely based on Lily's judgment, guided by a written statement from Margaret. My heart beat a little faster. A statement? I asked. He nodded. Yes. He picked up another folded paper. This was addressed specifically to you. He handed it to me. The room went completely still again. Because now, this wasn't just about money. This was about Grandma's voice. Her final words. I unfolded the paper slowly. My hands were steady. But inside, I felt something shift. Because I knew, whatever she wrote, it mattered. I began reading silently at first. Then Mr. Carter said gently, "Would you like to read it out loud?" I hesitated, then nodded, and began. Lily, even seeing my name in her handwriting made my chest tighten. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But I hope you're not sad for too long. Life is too short for that. I paused for a second, then continued. I know the rest of the family may be surprised by what I've left behind, but I want you to remember something very important. My voice grew steadier. Money shows people who they already are. It doesn't change them. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I kept reading. I have watched our family for many years. I have seen kindness, and I have seen the lack of it. The room felt colder somehow. So I am trusting you to make the right decisions, not based on guilt or pressure, but on truth. I swallowed slowly. Help those who truly deserve it, and don't feel obligated to those who never valued you or me. Silence. Complete silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Because those words were undeniable. They didn't accuse anyone directly, but everyone understood exactly what they meant. I lowered the paper slowly, my hands resting on the table. And for the first time, I looked directly at my family, really looked at them. And what I saw was no longer confidence, no longer superiority, just uncertainty. Because now, they weren't in control anymore. I was. And they had no idea whether I would choose to help them or walk away completely. No one spoke for several long seconds after I finished reading Grandma's letter. The silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, uncomfortable, because for the first time, my family wasn't avoiding the truth. They were sitting in it. My uncle shifted in his chair. Well, he said, clearing his throat, I think we all understand what she meant. But his voice didn't sound confident anymore. It sounded careful, like he was trying not to say the wrong thing. My aunt leaned forward again, her tone softer than ever. Lily, she said, your grandmother was a very thoughtful woman. I nodded. She was. Another pause. Then my cousin spoke, a little too quickly. I mean, we all cared about her. Of course we did. I looked at him. Did he believe that? Or was he saying it because now it mattered? I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I just asked one simple question. Then why didn't you visit her? The room went still again. My cousin opened his mouth, then closed it. No answer. Because there wasn't one. My uncle sighed. Life gets busy, he said. It does, I agreed calmly. But somehow, I always had time. No one responded to that. Because they couldn't. The truth didn't need to be loud. It was already clear. Mr. Carter quietly gathered his papers but didn't interrupt. He knew this moment mattered more than anything written in that folder. My aunt tried again. We can't change the past, she said gently. No, I replied. But we can be honest about it. Another silence. This one felt different, less defensive, more exposed. Because for the first time, they weren't just reacting to money. They were facing their own behavior. My uncle leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. So what happens now? He asked. There it was. The real question. Not about Grandma. Not about regret. About the future. About the money. About what I would do. I took a slow breath. Then I spoke. Grandma didn't leave this money to create more problems, I said. She left it to reveal something. They listened carefully, because now every word mattered. She wanted to show who we really are. My aunt nodded slightly. Yes, that makes sense. I looked at her. Does it? She hesitated, then looked down. Because understanding something and accepting it are not the same. I continued. I'm not going to make any decisions today. That immediately made a few of them tense. But I will say this, I added. I'm not interested in rewarding people who treated her like she didn't matter. No one argued. No one even tried. Because they knew. They all knew. My cousin shifted again. So, what does that mean for us? I met his eyes. It means I'll decide based on actions. Past or future? He asked quietly. Both. That answer stayed in the air for a moment, because it meant something very clear. They couldn't undo the past, but maybe, just maybe, they could change what came next. My aunt spoke again, more carefully this time. We can do better, she said. It wasn't a promise. It was a possibility. And for the first time, it sounded real. I nodded slightly. I hope so. The meeting ended shortly after that. No arguments. No dramatic exits. Just quiet understanding. As we stood up to leave, something had clearly shifted. Not just because of the money, but because the truth had finally been said out loud. My uncle paused near the door, then turned back to me. Lily, he said. His voice wasn't demanding anymore, or dismissive, just human. I should have visited her more. I held his gaze for a moment. Yes, I said. You should have, he nodded. And for once, he didn't try to defend himself. My aunt approached me next. She loved you very much, she said softly. I smiled. I know, because I did. Not because of the house, not because of the trust, but because she showed it in ways that didn't need money, time, attention, respect. The things that actually matter. As I walked out of that room, I felt something unexpected. Not power, not satisfaction, just clarity. Because Grandma hadn't just left me a trust. She had left me a responsibility, not to control people, but to understand them. And the most important decision was still ahead. Because what I chose to do with that $12 million would define not just my future, but theirs too. That night, I sat alone in Grandma's house. My house now. The same small living room. The same worn-out couch. The same quiet atmosphere that had always made me feel at peace. Nothing about the place had changed. And yet, everything had. The meeting replayed in my mind. The shock. The silence. The way my family had looked at me so differently than before. But the thing that stayed with me the most was Grandma's letter. Help those who truly deserve it. I held that thought as I walked slowly through the house. Her kitchen, her bedroom, the small table where we used to drink tea together. Every corner carried a memory, and every memory reminded me of something important. She never cared about proving anything to anyone. She didn't need to, because she knew who she was. And now, it was my turn to decide who I wanted to be. The next morning, I made a decision. Not about the money, but about the approach. I wasn't going to rush. I wasn't going to react emotionally. And I definitely wasn't going to let pressure guide me. Instead, I started by doing something simple. I called each family member one by one, not to talk about the trust, but to talk. Really talk. Some conversations were short, awkward,